Hey everyone, glad to have you here. If this is your first time, don't forget to subscribe. It helps me bring you more stories like this. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, get comfortable, it's time to dive into a chilling tale. My name is Daniel Mercer. If you've ever worked a board job, you know there's a rhythm to it. The soft hum of the control room HVAC, the quiet blink of LEDs on the annunciator wall, the logic of procedures that cradle your nerves like rails under a train. The unit, pressurized water reactor 3 loops, was at 86% power for a routine turbine valve test. We were steady, boring, safe. I told a new hire once that boredom is your favorite coworker at a nuclear plant. Sometime after dawn, the break room TV began spitting out the first reports. A shaky live shot from Richmond, then a bright graphic with a bar you never want to see outside a hurricane. Emergency broadcast. The words sounded wrong coming through the tinny screen speaker. Rapidly spreading infection. Shelter in place. Avoid contact. Someone muted it as if sound alone could make it more real. I stared a second too long, then did what I always do when something noisy tries to invade the room where your job is quiet. I went back to numbers. Loop temperatures, pressurizer level, neutron flux readouts. Perfect, like a metronome. We weren't far from Lake Anna, not far from the subdivisions that crawl along 2-lane roads with mailbox flags and basketball hoops over garages. On the whiteboard in the control room, a maintenance planner had drawn a cheerful stick figure holding a wrench. Below it, a list: RCP seal inspection, completed, AFW pump surveillance, due 11 o'clock, EDG walkdown, completed. It was just another morning until the doors locked. The lockdown was partial at first. Security announced it in that clipped, even tone they practice. This is a precautionary isolation. Remain in your work areas. All personnel, gate traffic suspended. No one said the word outbreak over the plant radio. The word lived only in the TV and in our faces. Our shift supervisor, Alana, made her rounds through the control room. She was the type who never raised her voice even when it mattered most. She had a pilot's cool. "We hold steady," she said. "We follow procedure. Whatever is happening outside, it stays outside." She put her palm on the gray metal edge of the operator's console as if to remind the equipment we were still here. That gesture calmed me more than any speech. Around 9, we heard banging at the main access door to the control room. 3 dull thuds like someone confused the route to the simulator. Security buzzed in. A turbine side operator named Cole stumbled through, pale and sweating under his hard hat. "Gate's a mess," he breathed. "People trying to get in. Security locked the turnstiles. Heard sirens on Route 522. He forced a grin at Alana. "But I made it." If you've never smelled fear through steel and carpet glue, it's a weird thing. Faint, like hot dust in a server rack. Cole tried to make himself small at the back of the room. He kept a hand in the pocket of his coveralls. That was the first detail I should have noticed. Alana gave out tasks in pairs. I got assigned to the next auxiliary feedwater pump check with Jorge from I&C. Tall, quiet, with a habit of humming the same 2 notes as he walked. We donned our radios, clipped a spare dosimeter to our pockets. The corridor outside the control room had that basement daylight you get through high, clerestory windows. No people. No voices. The plant felt like it had taken a deep breath and was holding it. We did the AFW valve stroke test from the local panel. Numbers matched the book. I made a joke about the coffee being the most dangerous fluid on site. Jorge smiled without showing his teeth and said nothing. He was humming, though. It was always the same 2 notes. Do-mi, do-mi. When we returned, the room had lost a shade of color. Cole was seated now, and I could see the sweaty rim of a bandage peeking at his collar. Alana noticed me notice, and her eyes narrowed. "Cole," she said gently, "you get scraped out there?" He forced a laugh, touched the bandage. "One of the crowd grabbed me at the parking lot fence. It's nothing. Nurses at the admin building dabbed it with something. They said I'm fine." The admin building had sent out an email 20 minutes earlier. Clinic closed. Nurse staff redeployed to Security Post 1. We all got it on our phones. No one looked up from their chairs. In operations, we say trust the instrument, but verify the power supply. People can be instruments in a crisis. They show you a reading, they even believe it, but a line is open somewhere you can't see. The first off normal came at 9:42. Grid voltage wavered, then stabilized. We logged it and called the load dispatcher. He sounded like he was on a storm desk. "We've got a lot of switching going on, multiple lines out. We'll keep you posted." 2 words you never loved to hear. At 10:03, a sliver of black crept across the annunciator wall like a cloud. Convac low flashed for Unit 2. Then, almost as a kindness, it cleared. I inhaled too quickly and swallowed air. Someone laughed in that thin way people laugh when they want to be brave. "Stay ahead of it," Alana said. "If we get a trip, we do what we've always done." I wanted to ask her whether the emergency operations facility would be staffed if we needed it, whether the county sirens that had once seemed like an annual paperwork exercise would now blare across cul-de-sacs. Instead, I checked the pressurizer level again, knowing it would be exactly what it was 3 minutes ago. The second off normal wasn't off normal at all. It was a scream in the hallway, the kind of sound that collapses distance into a point. It came from beyond the secondary door to the control room. A tight, human wail cut short. Security's radio crackled incoherently. One of our plant protection officers slammed into the control room with his gloved hand on the door, eyes wide. "They breached the admin lobby," he shouted. "Don't open this door unless we tell you." "They?" Alana asked, but the officer was gone, hauling the heavy door into place and engaging the top bolt. The feeling in my stomach was like stepping off a curb you didn't see. Cole stood too quickly. He swayed. I need air." His voice had a tremor to it, like a high-voltage line in wind. Alana's eyes moved to the bandage, and so did mine. "Cole," she said slowly, "when exactly did you get grabbed?" "I told you," he snapped, dragging his sleeve across his face. His pupils looked like the dots on a domino. "I'm fine." We all wanted him to be fine. The generous part of the brain gets loud when the rational part is scared. The plant gave us an anchor. At 10:17, a switchyard breaker tripped and we lost one of our off-site feeds. Safeties did what they were designed to do. We reconfigured. The rest of the grid held. We had redundancy for days, until you needed it. At 10:33, we got the thing every operator knows by feel before the alarms confirm it: loss of off-site power. Every light in the control room dimmed and then caught back up as the emergency diesel generators thundered to life in that gutting way big machines move air. The annunciators threw up a constellation of angry yellow. The turbine coasted down. In that artificial twilight, my brain did the old dance. Check core parameters. Check containment isolation. Check that your hands are steady enough to press the right rectangle to acknowledge alarms. Alana's voice was a metronome. "We're in the book. Follow the script." We worked. We flooded the steam generators from the aux feed system. We kept the reactor in a safe power range. We did not panic. Outside the control room, something banged again and again, as if trying to learn the timing on the heavy door. While the EDGs stabilized, the plant PA clicked on. There's a tone the system plays that reminds me of high school tornado drills. In a controlled, measured voice, someone from emergency preparedness announced, We are entering an unusual event. That's the lowest of the emergency classifications, the one you almost wish had a different name because it sounds silly in training slides. Then, 5 minutes later, we are elevating to an alert. The next step. I pictured colored cards flipping in a binder. By 11 o'clock, we were still on diesel. Off-site power was not returning our calls. The grid north of us was dark on the dispatcher's map, the voice on the other end brittle with too much work and not enough certainty. We had fuel, but every minute you spend on backup is a minute you can't spend on something else. Cole's chair sat empty. Alana glanced around. Where did he go? I found him in the short corridor to the battery room, elbow pressed to the wall, head bowed as if in prayer. He didn't respond when I said his name. When I put my hand on his shoulder, he flinched, turned, and his look went through me like a bright wire. There was a sheen to his skin like condensation on a glass. Hey, I said, soft as I could. You need medical. I'm fine, he said. The two words sounded like he learned them phonetically. Behind him, the door to the battery room stood ajar. That door is supposed to be closed when we're on emergency power, not because of some monster hiding behind it, but because you protect every system like a match in wind. Cole, I said. Let's get you sitting, come on. I stepped forward. He recoiled, slipped on something my brain refused to identify, and for a second his collar gaped. The bandage was no longer white. The skin beneath it looked wrong. Not broken in the gory sense, just wrong. Like the color had changed its mind. I had a choice right then, the kind they teach you in class you will probably never face. Do you confront the person you don't trust in a narrow corridor where your world narrows to door frames and the smell of vented hydrogen, or do you create space? I took a slow step back, palms up. Let me call Alana, I said. Sit, please. He stared through me. Fine, he repeated, but his voice was a half-inch misaligned with his mouth. He moved past me in a stagger that wasn't quite a walk. He didn't go back toward the control room. He moved toward the rad waste corridor. I told myself later that I called out. I told myself I didn't want the other operators to become part of what was already unraveling. What I did, in the end, was reach for my radio and say, Alana, I've got Cole in the east corridor. He's not well. Before she could answer, the plant added a new drumbeat. Containment high-range monitor blipped up a single increment. Not high, not dangerous by itself, but higher than it should be. The HVAC rumbled and shifted as the building moved to a tighter isolation mode. I checked my dosimeter, a reflex I couldn't stop. Still negligible. We were safe for now inside our tight little universe of steel and procedural order. The trouble was that even a tight universe has doors, and something was outside, wanting in. Alana met me in the corridor with two of security's plant protection officers. They wore their tactical vests and the focused look of people who had been given a simple instruction: keep this place intact. One of them, a woman named Ferris with an old scar along her jawline, asked, Where? Rad waste corridor, I said, and pointed. We moved. We found Cole at the end of the corridor, standing in front of a locked equipment cage, breathing as if air had to fight its way into him. He turned when he heard us. His eyes were wrong now, glassy and overbright. You could almost imagine he'd just run a marathon, almost. Cole, Alana said, and her voice found that quiet space the rest of us had lost. We're going to take care of you. Sit down. He did not sit. He took one step forward, and then another, and when Ferris lifted a palm in that universal request for calm, he flinched like he meant to rattle past. She didn't draw anything. She moved sideways, using the corridor's geometry like a shepherd dog. The other officer stepped up behind him, hands ready, not aggressive, just ready. When they touched his elbows, gently, he stopped being a coworker. His movement went from human to something clipped and mechanical. He jolted, twisting with a strength that came out of nowhere, and slammed Ferris back into the cinder-block wall hard enough to crack paint. It was not theatrical or bloody, it was just wrong. It was wrong to see in a hallway where the vents sang and the floor was clean enough to eat off. "Cole," Alana's voice had steel. "Stop." For a millisecond, he did. Then he surged again. The second officer did what he had to do. He controlled the body, forced it to the ground with a practiced technique that ended in restraints. No weapons. Just training. The human thing showed for a second in the tremor of the officer's arm. "What is happening?" he whispered. And it wasn't a question for any of us to answer. We got Cole to the plant clinic room. Little more than a pair of cots and a refrigerator full of ice packs. The nurse wasn't there anymore. We secured the door because that's what you do when you don't know what else to do. I slid a water bottle into the room and backed away. Cole didn't look at me. His head tilted as if to listen to something only he could hear. Back in the control room, we learned what the TV could not teach us. Chaos has a rhythm. You think it's all noise, but it has verses and a chorus. The next verse began at 12:14 with an alarm I have only ever heard in drills. Control room door status compromised. The heavy door bucked against its frame hard enough to shake dust from a ceiling vent. Someone outside hit it again and again. Security's radio called over hours. Admin lobby lost. Multiple infected in the atrium. Officer down. The words "officer down" should be reserved for war zones or movies, not for our drab, safe hallways. And yet the world had decided we were all acting in some other story. Ferris's jaw clenched. "We need to hold this." "We need to keep the core cool," Alana said at the same time. Her voice didn't get louder. It got clearer. "Both," I said before I could stop myself. The word came out like a decision and tasted like metal. The banging stopped. It started again, but it was a different rhythm now. Lighter, like more hands. The control room is built like a bank. It's designed to be the last sane room in the world when the wind outside goes wrong. But no sane room can stand if it stops being a room and becomes an idea. We rerouted auxiliary feed water to keep the steam generators covered. We verified the EDGs were healthy. We closed what we needed to close to keep the reactor under a warm, docile hand. The control room sounded like it always does when you're too busy to be afraid. A low murmur of voices, the clack of relays behind panels, the aluminum tick of pen on logbook paper. At 12:22, the ventilation control panel lit up with an amber that said smoke-detected turbine building mezzanine. The fire phone rang. "We've got a hot motor," a maintenance tech reported between coughs. "Not flaming yet. There's people in the stairwell who shouldn't be. We're trying to corral them to the laydown area. They're not listening." "Pull the local fire alarm," Alana said. "Get out. We'll isolate air." Her eyes flicked to Ferris. "You'll need to secure the access between turbine and control." Ferris didn't ask questions. She took the other officer and left through the emergency egress corridor, the one with 2 more doors and a camera that feeds a fisheye to our panel. On the monitor, a smear of figures moved like shadows. The moment they were gone, the banging returned, heavier this time, and a crack showed at the edge of the control room door. It was small, no wider than a thumbnail, but the sight of it pulled sweat from me like a switch. Alana said, "Ignore it." She could have been telling us to ignore a car alarm in the parking lot. Ignore it. Focus on the thing only you can do. At 12:30, containment pressure nudged up 1 more line on the chart. Not a big spike, just 1 more tick. I stared at the number the way you stare at a fever chart and pretend 1 degree isn't a story. "We're good," I told myself. "We're good." The words are a warding spell you cast against your own imagination. Then the fire alarm for the rad-waste corridor went. I looked at Alana, and she looked at me, and we had the same thought. Cole. I volunteered before she could assign the task. "I'll go," I said. "I'll take a pack." "Take PPE," she said. "If you see smoke, you don't be a hero." The plant's fire brigade gear isn't stylish, but it is real. Turnout coat, helmet, SCBA. I strapped the air bottle to my back and felt a sudden pressure in my chest that had nothing to do with lung capacity. The corridor outside the control room smelled like cold metal and the memory of people. I checked my dosimeter again. Still fine. Still a normal day if you looked only at numbers. 2 mechanics met me at the intersection near Radwaste. Both of them keyed up like dogs before a thunderstorm. "You heard it?" one asked, as if the alarm might be a rumor. "I heard," I said. "Stay behind me." I didn't say it to be a hero. I said it because that's the line the book writes for you, and you learn to speak the book when your mouth is dry. The door to the clinic room was ajar. A plastic water bottle lay on its side, slow droplets rolling toward a floor drain like a lazy metronome. Inside, the cot was empty. The restraints sat coiled on the pillow like sleeping snakes. The bandage that had been white was now a memory of white. We followed the sound before we saw the source. A soft thunk, 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 like someone testing springs on an old couch. It came from the end of the corridor near the Radwaste compactor, where the light always seems a fraction dimmer. We stepped into the bay, and I felt a faint wash of heat that didn't belong here. The compactor room's smoke detector was honest. A small fire danced in a spill tray beneath a workbench. Oily rags, the old enemy. It was manageable, the kind of fire your training loves. There was a wall-mounted extinguisher. I grabbed it, pulled the pin, squeezed. The stream was businesslike, almost bored. The fire died the way a stubborn candle dies, a curl of darkened air. Then a shape moved in the shadow under the workbench. Fast, not dramatic, just wrong. I yanked the SCBA mask tighter out of reflex. The mechanics swore softly. The figure uncurled. It was Cole. He shuffled into the open under the bay lighting. He looked hollowed out and bright all at once. His eyes found me, then lost me, then found me again with a mild curiosity like you'd look at a new vending machine. He took a step. The 2 mechanics backed up without meaning to. "Cole," I said through the mask, and my voice came out tinny. "Stop." He didn't understand the word. Or he did, and something else vetoed it. He took another step, and now he was between us and the exit. The 2 mechanics looked at me with a threaded mixture of fear and responsibility. There are moments you can feel the world pivot. The room was small, the bench was a choke point. The extinguisher was an equalizer and a movie prop. In my chest, the air tasted different. I didn't want to hurt him. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I wanted him to sit down and become a person again. But want and possibility had filed irreconcilable differences. "Back left," I told the mechanics. "On my go." There was an emergency door behind the compactor. It led to a stairwell. If I could distract him for 2 seconds, he moved first. A lunge without grace or plan. And I stepped sideways and discharged a short blurt of extinguisher powder not at him, but at the floor between us. It bloomed white and opaque. The mechanics reacted like pros. Pivot, slide, through. The door banged. For a half second I was alone with the someone who had been my coworker 3 hours ago. He lunged again. I raised my forearm, not to block but to guide. We came together and then apart like poorly rehearsed dancers. I pushed and spun and my boot squeaked on dusted floor. He stumbled into the steel leg of the workbench and went down. Not dramatically, not like a movie. He went down like a person trips over on a sidewalk. I used the half-second to move. Out, pull door, engage bar, breathe. The stairwell was cooler. The SCBA hissed like a sleepy snake. The mechanics looked at me the way new divers look at their instructor after an emergency drill, grateful and a little appalled. We didn't go back the way we'd come. We took the long way round to the control room, up a flight, down a flight, through the old spill kit closet with the door that sticks. My heartbeat began to match the sound of the EDGs, a big machine's metronome. When we reached the control room anteroom, Ferris was back with a rip in her vest and a line of drying red on her forearm that I tried not to log in my mind. "Admin building's gone," she said. "We sealed turbine access, but they're pressing. We've got a handful of plant personnel still unaccounted for." She didn't say their names out loud. Saying names makes them stories. Alana had 3 lines and 2 arrows on a whiteboard now, a battlefield sketch and dry erase. "We can ride on diesel for the remainder of the day," she was saying, "but we should anticipate refuel." She looked up. "Dan." "Radwaste fire out," I said. "Cole is not safe. He's contained for now. We need to keep that area isolated. And we need to keep an eye on any heat sources there." I left out the part where I felt like I'd just been in a test I didn't study for. Then the alarms came in a cluster that stiffened all our necks. Our CP trip on Loop B, then a secondary chemistry alarm that almost certainly wasn't about chemistry anymore, then a brief flicker on pressurizer PORV status that made my stomach lurch until the indicator settled. We were still safe. We were still within margins. But the room was smaller than it had been an hour ago. Alana did what she always did. She cut the chaos into solvable slices. "We'll stabilize the loop," she said. "We'll cross-connect as needed. We keep the reactor in the box. We watch containment like it's the only thing left in the world." Then she looked at me again. "Dan, I might need you on the floor if we have to local check valves." "Copy," I said, and my mouth remembered moisture. We worked, we acknowledged alarms, we traced causes, we corrected. The banging at the door came and went like surf. Every time it hit, someone's eyes flicked to the camera monitor to make sure the hinges were still doing hinge things. At 13:06, the world tried to tilt. Containment hydrogen monitor trending up flashed on the panel. It wasn't a scary number, it was a direction. Hydrogen after a trip isn't unheard of. But everything that isn't unheard of becomes a portent when you're tired and the doors are flexing. We open the book to the page that begins, "If hydrogen concentration in containment is above," and Alana's finger rested on the line without moving. "Watch it," she said. "Don't touch anything you don't have to touch." There's an old operator's joke. The plant is a giant tea kettle. Keep the water where the water belongs, and the heat where the heat belongs. We were doing that meticulously, and yet the world outside had decided that meticulousness was an antique. At 13:20, the PA clicked on without a tone. Someone's voice, breathless. "Security to Radwaste. We've got movement on cameras." "Door?" The transmission cut off with a rattle that might have been the mic hitting a floor. I looked at Ferris. She looked at me. "I'll go," she said, before I could volunteer again. "You're more useful in here." "You're not wrong," I said. But the image of the compactor room door slamming behind me replayed in my head like a gif. "Take a mask," I added. "Take 2. She nodded. The door camera showed her team do that law enforcement glide down the egress corridor, shoulders square, weapons low. I watched until the picture fuzzed. Interference from the EDG room, maybe, or from the fact that sometimes you can't have both knowledge and safety. We didn't hear from her for 10 minutes. In that time, the plant threw us 2 more gifts. A minor steam leak on a secondary line in the turbine building, easily isolated, and a spike on a radiation monitor that turned out to be a false alarm trip when a cable in a junction box picked exactly this day to wiggle loose. I told myself, not for the first time, that the universe does not time its pranks for maximum dramatic effect. It just feels that way. At 13:30, Ferris's radio came back with a hiss of breath and one word: contained. She did not elaborate. I did not ask. Information is a vector. You manage it like heat. By 14 o'clock, the EDG settled into the low grumble of a reliable uncle. We had auxiliary feed steady. The reactor sat in that quiet place operators secretly love because the core's long memory makes the world feel patient. The banging had stopped, replaced by smaller sounds you can trick yourself into not hearing. Then came the thing that made us all understand the day had been giving us practice problems. Control room, breach alarm, inner door. There's an inner door. Everyone forgets about it until you need to remember. It's a maintenance access, kept locked, rarely used because you don't like to fiddle with the belly of a living thing. The camera that covers it is black and white and the lens needs a cleaning. I knew that because I'd been complaining about it for a month. On the fuzzy monitor, a shape nudged into frame. It looked wrong, like a person drawn by someone who had never seen a person. It pressed at the inner door, found no purchase, pressed again. Even before I could process the fear, my brain did a petty, bureaucratic thing. We filed a work order to better secure that corridor. It hasn't been actioned. The thought came with a small, mean thrill, as if being right had any oxygen value today. Alana didn't look at the monitor. She looked at the wall clock, at the annunciator, at the column of procedures arrayed like a library on the shelf by her elbow. "We are not going to lose this room," she said. Not passionate, not even determined, just factual like a weather report. "We are not going to lose this core." On the other side of that inner door, something, scraped. The sound was low enough to get under your skin. Alana picked up the red phone to security. "We have movement at the inner door," she said. "Advise." A new voice answered, baritone, calm, the shift security supervisor. "We're en route. Hold for my call." He sounded like a man on a ship in heavy weather who believes in ships. Time began to fold then. Minutes became a soup. We kept the plant in its box and we listened. I thought of my wife, Claire, who worked days at a dental clinic in Mineral, and who likely had been told to go home and lock the door, and who had a habit of texting me pictures of our dog in sunglasses when she knew I was stressed. I imagined her not texting. I imagined the world too busy for sunglasses. At 14:12, the inner door camera went blank. Just a smear. Then the screen resolved for a heartbeat and all I saw was an eye, too close to the lens, unblinking. It could have been a smudge on glass. It could have been my own reflection. Then gone. The monitor reverted to fuzz. "Security," Alana said into the red phone. "We've lost the inner door camera." "Copy," the baritone said. 2 minutes out, barricade if able." We did, or rather, the two operators with the strongest backs did, sliding the emergency filing cabinets, the ones that hold blank procedures, into place like medieval furniture dragged against a castle gate. It felt absurd and perfectly appropriate at the same time. Something bumped the inner door, not hard, just a test, then again harder. Then the heavy outer door, our thick gray friend, shivered in sympathy. I found my place then. It wasn't where I thought it would be. It wasn't in the hero corridor or the improvised fire brigade. It was at the console no one else was looking at because we all had only 2 eyes. The hydrogen trend had eased. The steam line leak was quiet. The core sat where we asked it to sit. The thing that needed watching, The thing no one else's mind had a spare hand for was the auxiliary feedwater supply tank level. It was creeping down a shade faster than predicted. Not enough to set an alarm yet, enough to ruin a day if you missed it. I called it out. AFW tank trending low. We may need to swap to the alternate. Alana glanced. One glance was enough. Make the call, she said, which meant I trust you more than it meant I don't want to decide. I stepped through the actions with an operator's shyness about the incantations we speak over steel. We transferred, checked that the new path took, and watched the level settle into a slope we could live with. In the background, the door thumped like a heartbeat. Security arrived with a rattle of keys and a hiss of radio voices. The inner door took the abuse of a battering ram designed to keep bodies on their side and procedures on ours. The baritone voice belonged to a man with close-cropped hair and kindness in his eyes. He nodded at Alana as if we were at a potluck. You hold your world, he said. We'll hold ours. They did. For a while. We heard 3 sharp sounds, not gunshots, though my brain sought that movie word, but the pops of less lethal rounds. There were yells that did not sound like dialogue. Then a thud and a scrape and a silence that wasn't empty, but full of things we chose not to name. At 15 o'clock, an hour that felt both like the 100th of the day and the first, the grid dispatcher called back with a voice like dry leaves. We can give you 1 line in 20 minutes, he said, assuming the substation north holds. He didn't promise. He didn't ask for our thanks. Work recognizes work. Plan for a hot transfer, Alana told us. We'll synchronize when we can. No heroics. More minutes, more checks. The world outside the plant had themes. Sirens, shouts, the thud of bodies that would not rest. But inside the room, the theme was steadiness. I thought of my dad's old fishing advice, keep your line tight, and whatever's on the other end will teach you what it is. The plant was teaching us it wanted to live if we did not panic. At 15:21, off-site power returned to one of our feeds. The transfer felt like pulling onto asphalt after riding out a washboard road. The EDG sighed, there's no other word for how big machines relax, and settled into idle. I loved them in that moment the way you love a friend who drove through a blizzard to pick you up. We were not done. The turbine building still had smoke ghosts. The admin building was a lost story. The infected, saying the word, still felt like inviting a superstition to dinner, moved like troubled weather in pockets we couldn't clear. And then, as if the day had decided we deserved extra homework, containment pressure did a small, meaningful thing upward. We watched it become a trend, slowly, like a thought you don't want to admit you're having. It wasn't a rupture, our worst fairy tale. It was the building acclimating to a day of insults, temperature differentials, moves and countermoves, the way heat likes to find corners. Alana's finger hovered over the procedure that would have us consider containment sprays. That's not a button you push because you're nervous. That's a tool you use because math says so. We watched, we plotted, we listened to the curve as if it might tell us whether it cared about us. It eased, or we convinced ourselves it did. Either way, we did not spray. Around 16 o'clock, the banging at the door stopped for good. The silence that arrived was not a gift. It was a space where thoughts could breed. Security reported the inner corridor secure. We took the furniture away from the door 1 piece at a time, as if it might interpret speed as disrespect. We didn't open the door. We just let it be a door again. Alana let us breathe then. 1 by 1, we ate a protein bar. We sipped a bottled water. We texted the people we loved. Claire's reply pinged my phone like a bell. Home, door locked, love you. The words didn't solve anything. They built a scaffold in my chest I could stand on. We weren't out of the woods. We had simply found a path where the ground was less muddy. We wrote our logs. We updated the EAL status, still at alert. The county sirens had likely sounded an hour ago. I imagined them trailing off into cul-de-sacs where the only sound now would be dogs and the wind. Security escorted a small group of our people from a holdout in the simulator building back to the main plant. Among them was Jorge, tall and quiet, humming his 2 notes through lips that wanted to tremble. He took the board from me and I stepped back, finally allowing my body to admit tiredness. "Thanks," he said, like we'd swapped a Saturday shift. At 17:15, as the light outside slanted into that amber that belongs only to late summer in Virginia, we heard the sound of rotors. Low, steady, a kind of blanket hum that made the hair on my arms rise. A state police helicopter circled once over the lake and banked away. Whether it saw us or cared, I do not know. It reminded me the world had not fallen fully into noise. We rode the unit through the rest of the afternoon, tracked every parameter like a heartbeat on an ICU monitor, and waited for someone higher on a flowchart to tell us the shape of tomorrow. When the sun moved to the far side of the control room's narrow windows and laid a stripe across the panel, I realized I had been awake for 20 hours. Adrenaline is a liar. It promises you it will let you down gently, and then it drops you. As evening approached, we did something small and grand. We made coffee. The machine in the corner gurgled with that homely sound it makes in break rooms and kitchens, and apparently war rooms. We took paper cups and did not apologize for how long we held them. We learned later what had happened in the admin building, how quickly a crowd can become a force, how a single person with a lie under his skin can turn a safe hallway into a place you want to unsee. We learned names. We made a list with check marks and absences. We promised ourselves we would fill the blanks with something like memory. But that night, because by then it was night, even if the clocks did not believe it, we did the ancient thing that is our only real superstition. We shook hands at shift change. We looked into each other's faces and saw the tally of the hours written there. We did not say good job or hero or any of the words that would make the day a movie. We said, "See you at 8, because that was the bravest sentence we owned. I walked out under a sky that had smeared the afterglow into a band over the pines. The parking lot was mostly empty, a wrongness all by itself. My car was where I left it, an island under a sodium light. I sat with my forehead on the steering wheel until the metal cooled through my skin. On the drive home, the radio gave me a rotation of phrases I will never forget. Shelter in place, avoid contact, do not attempt to travel. There were no commercials. Somewhere between the plant and the 2-lane that took me to my town, a deer stepped onto the road and then thought better of it, as if the forest had voted for sanity in a day that didn't advertise it. Our house had its lights off the way we had planned in a dozen small what-if conversations that once felt like couples therapy and today felt like rehearsal. I knocked our idiot pattern on the door and Claire opened it with wide eyes and a smile that tried to be calm. The dog, Bowie, wiggled with all the relief 2 lungs can hold. We didn't hug the way people do in movies after something almost happens. We stood 2 feet apart and took inventory. Her, fine. Me, fine. The dog, a fool. The power on. The world, not. Then she stepped to me and put her hand where Alana had put hers that morning. On a metal edge. On the reality of a thing that held. We sat at the kitchen table and drank water because it made sense. "What was it like?" she asked, finally. Her voice had to thread itself around the question like a vine around a trellis. "Loud," I said. Then quiet, then loud again. But the right kind of loud, mostly. I tried to smile and my face reminded me I was made of muscles, not script. "Did you stop it?" "We didn't let it start. I said. The difference felt like a prayer and an accusation. We kept the heat where the heat belongs, and the water where the water belongs. We didn't let fear run the board. And the people? We saved who we could, I said. We didn't. We couldn't. There were places we didn't reach in time. I was careful with words, the way you are careful with tools that cut. She reached across the table. I took her hand. My skin remembered the pressure of SCBA straps and console edges in the door push bar. It learned a new pressure, hers. Outside, a siren put a pencil line across the night and then erased itself. I slept for 4 hours that felt like a blank page. I woke at 1 a.m. with the taste of extinguisher powder in my mouth and the image of an eye too close to a lens. I walked the house, each room its own reactor with its own parameters. Window latches, door bolts, flashlight battery levels. I checked the dog's water. I resisted the urge to turn on the TV, to add someone else's noise to the symphony already playing in my head. At 4, the plant called. It was Alana. Her voice was sanded down but whole. "We need you back," she said lightly, as if asking me to pick up milk. "We're going to take the unit to cold shutdown. We've got the manpower, but I want you in the room." I looked at Claire. I mouthed sorry and I love you in the same motion. She nodded without blinking. "Go," she said. And the word built a bridge for me to walk back onto. Driving in the pre-dawn, the sky was a deep cobalt with a seam of silver on the eastern edge. I thought of the plant sitting in the dark like a sleeping animal. Heat inside it the way a heart carries warmth through winter. I thought of the procedures, ink on paper, little ladders our thoughts could climb. We brought the unit down in stages the way you descend a mountain. Deliberately, testing each foothold. No heroics, no shortcuts. The world outside was still writing a story in which crowds were the weather and the safest thing you could do was stay put. Inside, the control room wrote a story in which numbers moved where numbers should move and knees did not bend before doors. Cold shutdown is a phrase that feels like a blanket. The core still holds heat like a cast iron pan holds warmth after you take it off the flame. And we mind it for hours and days, stroking it with pumps and valves the way you would soothe a fever, but it is safer. It is patient. It asks for attention, not heroism. We did not use words like victory or triumph. We used words like stable and verified and copied. We wrote logs. We drank coffee. We breathed like people who had learned to find oxygen in small spaces. Cole's name wasn't said out loud that day, but I wrote it in the margin of my log where I keep personal notes I will never show anyone. I wrote it next to a small square I drew, and in the square I put a dot. It was nothing. It was my way of making the day human. There will be afters. There will be investigations and timelines and a line in a report that says something like, "Loss of off-site power coincident with security event." There will be memos about doors. There will be memorials in small rooms with coffee urns, and a bad floral arrangement and a list of stories that do not end at the edge of a parking lot. But the thing I will remember, and the thing that will make my hands without my permission find a console edge whenever I stand near one, is this. We had a day when the world wanted very much to teach us a lesson about chaos, and we, ordinary, trained, stubborn, declined the lecture. We kept the heat where the heat belongs. We kept the water where the water belongs. We let the door be a door. We let the room be a room. And in a room built under rules, we did not let fear write any of the lines. When I finally went home again, 40 hours after the shift that started like any other, the lake looked the same. The trees did their tree business. The sun pulled itself up like it always does, uninterested in our drama. Claire brewed coffee, and the dog continued to believe the world's primary function was to throw balls. I stood in the doorway and watched the light cross the floor. I put my hand on the wood, tender as a patient's wrist. The world was still the world. It wasn't, and it was. Somewhere the admin building had quieted. Somewhere a siren wasn't sounding anymore because there was no one left who needed to hear it. Somewhere a grid dispatcher took a breath and checked his map. I don't know how long we will live in this half-light. I know reactors better than I know crowds. I know heat better than I know fear. But now, when my hands find the rails, they will also remember a different edge. The feeling when a door shuttered and didn't break, and when a room full of people who'd been trained to keep one kind of fire under control kept another kind by refusing to look away. People ask me when I let them whether we stopped the meltdown. It's not the right question. It wasn't a day for stopping. It was a day for holding, for refusing to let go. The core didn't melt because the core didn't have to. We made sure it didn't. We stayed when our legs wanted to run and our hands wanted to be fists. We watched numbers. We spoke procedures aloud like prayers. We clamped our fear inside the same boundaries we use for heat and water. And for one long, loud, quiet day, it worked. Tomorrow we'll do it again, and the day after that. And until the world remembers the difference between the sound a door makes when it's threatened and the sound it makes when it just wants to be a door. Thanks for listening till the end. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like and subscribe. It helps keep the channel going and brings more stories your way. Remember, the darkness is always closer than it seems.